Wickedness does not come into our lives and into our families announcing itself as being such. It comes into our lives in a sly and sneaky way. It starts off with something that is okay. Okay, we can do this and we're still within the bounds of what Scripture teaches. Maybe a little bit borderline, but it's okay. You know, those small lies in order to avoid hurting somebody's feelings. You know, these little things. But as time goes on, more and more we find out that they lead to bigger and bigger things. And this is how wickedness operates. It operates kind of behind the scenes until it continues to grow. And it grows and it grows to the point to where now it just becomes blatant. And now we're there. We didn't even realize it was going to happen. It's like the alcoholic didn't start off one day and decide to be an alcoholic. It's not like a drug addict decided one day to become a drug addict. These aren't planned things. These things develop over time. This is how wickedness operates. It always has. Even back in the garden, when Satan came to Eve, it wasn't, God said this, no, God's lying to you. He didn't say that. He kind of tricked into it. You know, just try this. It's not that bad. It's okay. David is dealing kind of with this whole problem of the wickedness that's sneaking in. So we got this fairly short psalm, Psalm 140. And it is, the first 5 verses are kind of the problem. Verses 6 through 8, crying out to the Lord. And then verses 9 through 13, the response of the Lord, or the actions of the Lord. Verse 1, rescue me, O Lord, from evil men. Preserve me from violent men. Starts right off, evil men, and we have the problem of we always attach evil to a person and make the person evil. Generally, the problem isn't so much the person, it is the actions. So it's the actions of evil men that are a problem. Okay, and this is what David is calling out for. Rescue me from the actions of evil men. Preserve me from violent men. Evil always reverts itself over to violence. The two are synonymous with each other. You have someone that is evil, they are tend towards violence. And not necessarily violence in the same way that we think of as they start beating each other up with their fists or shooting each other or whatever the case may be. No, it's violence against a person is literally leading them away from truth. That's violence. So, who are the wicked men, the violent men? Those that propagate sin. Now, what does it mean to propagate something? And you look that up in the dictionary. To grow, to cultivate, to generate. So you have those that propagate sin, they grow sin, they generate sin, they cultivate sin. Sin in our lives gets cultivated. Most of you know what cultivating is, where you go through and you turn up the dirt and to kind of get the weeds out. You're cultivating. And what they're doing is they're cultivating out the good in us and leaving the wickedness. And this is part of their plan. It's to make us less and less dependent upon our God and more dependent upon ourselves. In Matthew 18, 6 and 7, but whoever causes one of these, and this is one of Jesus' teachings, who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks, for it is inevitable that stumbling blocks come. But woe to the man through whom the stumbling block comes. Here again, the slyness of wicked. Oh, Jesus is giving a warning. He's giving a warning to people that are doing these things to the little children, or you might even say to his children, to us. People that are bringing stuff into our lives that are a danger, that are bad, that are evil. Okay, Jesus says, for those that are doing that, the ones that are causing this action, they should have a heavy millstone put around their neck and thrown into the sea. Well, that's a pretty drastic measure. But basically, Jesus is teaching that whole concept, that evil of that person needs to be destroyed, done away with, thrown away. But then he also kind of gives something interesting. He says, stumbling blocks will come. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. This isn't like, oh no, there's a stumbling block there. God, why did you allow this to happen? He says, they're going to be there. It's how you deal with them that's the important part. But don't be the one that actually brings the stumbling block. When we bring things into our lives, into our families, into our marriages that are destructive, we become the stumbling block. We are the ones that end up causing others to sin. And this is what Jesus is warning about. Woe to the one that does this. The one that brings the evil in. And sometimes, here again, slyness of evil, it might be just a little thing. Something that really isn't a big deal, but it's kind of borderline. Okay? Again, we talk about just a little bit of drugs. Just a little of this, just a little of that. Just a little lies. Just a little hatred. Just a little anger. They build, they grow. Verse 2, who devise evil things in their hearts, they continually stir up wars. Here again, devise. We'll break that one down. To plan, to invent a complex procedure. Wickedness doesn't work in a manner that is straightforward and simple. It puts together a plan. And it might be a very complicated plan. But the plan is in place, and the plan is designed to trick us into following it without knowing we are following it. So the wickedness devises this plan of how to draw us into their plot. Okay? But in the continually stirring up wars. Right? There's no way that wickedness can come into my life and in the end result become a war. Oh, really? You're missing it. Okay? We think of wars as nations against nations. Every one of us sitting here is familiar with a war taking place inside our family. Oh, never think of those wars. Well, they are. Wickedness creeps in and just inches slowly on inside to create animosity, to create anger, to create bitterness, to create jealousy. Get involved in the separating out of items from the deceased grandpa and his will and those who are going to receive what? It seems like most of the time there's somebody that's not happy. And when they're not happy, they want to make sure that everybody else isn't happy. Wickedness slyly moving its way in. Now, in some families, there's that one person that shows up for the family get-togethers, that as soon as that person comes in the door, everything goes quiet. Because nobody likes that one. That one always comes and raises and causes up problems. And just kind of, we were all having a really good time together. We were getting along well, and then this one shows up. And all of that harmony is gone. This is what Jesus warned, no, don't be that one. So it starts off with pride and selfish thoughts. Okay? Then putting a plan in place to achieve that goal. It's when we always put ourselves first, and we come into there, we're going to figure it out. This is how I am going to get what I want. Because suddenly it becomes about I, me. Not the whole family, not the whole group. My part, what do I get? And then a war starts. And that war is in the family, it might be a war amongst friends, and this can escalate all the way into war among nations. Because wars don't begin by two leaders getting up one morning, making a phone call and say, hey, I'm going to war with you today. It doesn't work that way. It builds slowly. Verse 3, they sharpen their tongues as a serpent. Poison of the viper is under their lips. Sharpen their tongues as a serpent. Well, that so often is used, that whole concept of a serpent, is liars. So they plan their lies. Now, the best lies that you can tell, if a lie can be good, but the most effective is where it's mostly truth. Right? See, because a blatant lie generally will stand right out and people will see through it what it is. But if it has a lot of truth in it, then it sneaks in. Or you have the other type of speech that cuts, that wounds, that severing of relationships. And that always amazes me, of how two people can spend years together as good friends. They do many things together. And suddenly one person says something to the other, and the other takes it as being just a terrible backstabbing wound. How can you possibly betray me like this? And it may have been or may not have been a betrayal. But those words cut so deep that this relationship, this friendship that was so strong for so long is now severed. They don't want to speak to each other. Matter of fact, they hate each other. There is such great animosity, and it builds and it builds. And it started off with a simple sentence or comment. Years later, you go back and you look at this, and you look at that whole scenario that separated these friends out, these family members out, and you realize that that thing that was said in kindness and taken wrong. But the response was instant, so the response was defense. The response was, I'm going to get back at you. And it goes back and forth till it builds, till the separation seems to be where it can't be fixed. And it all started off with this little thing. The wicked are sly. Verses 4 and 5, keep me, O Lord, from the hands of the wicked. Preserve me from violent men who have proposed to trip up my feet. The proud have hidden a trap for me and cords. They have spread a net by the wayside. They have set snares for me. Now David is going and saying, protect me. Protect me from the wicked. And here again, let's not take this as a person as much as an action. And the action is done by a person, but the the protection we need is not from a person. We need to be protected against the actions of the person. And who have proposed to trip up my feet. How many of us have siblings, and when we were young, they would be running through the living room, and you get the foot out there. I'll get you. It's just fun. It's just fun. Well, here, wickedness is kind of doing that same thing. It's just playful fun. Yeah, you can fall down and we all laugh and everything's good. It's just a little fun. And the proud have hidden a trap. we're going to fall into these things that we didn't even know were there. They're hidden. And they spread a net by the wayside. Okay, the wayside is, in today's, what they say, language would be the rest area. Okay, you're going down I-40, you've been traveling for a few hours, it's time to stop, but you really don't want to get off the expressway and go to some service station or whatever. A rest area works perfect, because I'm in and out, plenty of parking, no problem. And I'm not even tempted to buy anything, except when I walk away over to that vending machine for, everything's twice as much every place else, but anyway, I can ignore that, okay? So that's the wayside. They spread a net because as you come in and you get your parking and then you go inside the restroom and it's closed for cleaning. Well, generally they have a second set. So you go over to the other set and everybody else decided to stop at the same time I did. Nothing seems to work out. Okay, so you've got this problem of being trapped in a place that you wanted to go. And they set snares. The snares are the vending machines around the other side. Those are the snares. In Acts 6:23 through 25, many days had elapsed. The Jews plotted together to do away with him. And this is Saul before his name became Paul. But this was in the beginning of his ministry. Okay. But their plot became known to Saul. They also watching the gates day and night so that they might put him to death. But his disciples took him by night and let him down through an opening and the wall, lowering him in a large basket. Now here was literally setting a trap. They're guarding the gates to make sure that Saul doesn't get out because they hate him and they're going to kill him. Well, his friends get together and say, no, I got a buddy who's got a room on the wall, and his room is a window in the wall. We can open that window, we can let you down, and you can escape, and nobody will even know. So there is a trap, but there's also an escape. Verse 6, I said to the Lord, you are my God. Give ear, O Lord, to the voice of my supplication. Now David is going back and saying, you are my God. I know who you are, and since you are my God, the voice of my supplication, that word basically means to ask earnestly. It's not just, God, please help me. It's, God, please help me. Earnestly. Charles Spurgeon had a good one here. He said, because he is God, he can hear us. Because he is our God, he will hear us. I like that. Verse 7. O God, the Lord, the strength of my salvation, you have covered my head in the day of battle. Interesting, it starts off, O God, the Lord. Kind of an interesting phrase. But in reality, it's in here you would have Jehovah Adonai. And Adonai is the name for master. So it's, oh God, my master. The strength of my salvation. Because that is our only option for salvation, is through our God. You have covered my head. And notice it's past tense. It's not, you are covering my head, you will cover my head. It says, no, you have. Which is good, because it means that protection is already there. You covered my head in the day of battle. And of course, that automatically should bring us to what Paul said about the helmet of salvation. We're covered. We're covered by the salvation of our God, our master. Verse 8, do not grant, O Lord, the desires of the wicked. Do not promote his evil devices, that they may not be exalted. It almost seems like a silly line. when you think about it first. Do not grant, O Lord, the desires of the wicked. Why in the world would God be tempted to allow the desires of the wicked? Wouldn't he automatically stop them? And do not promote their evil device? Okay, it's kind of hard to imagine God promoting evil. But David wrote this, and he must have meant something by it. Do not grant, O Lord, the desires of the wicked. Lord, I know wickedness is contrary to your desires. And I'm just pleading with you as I plead with you in so many other things, where I know where you stand, but you have told me to come before you with anything and with everything. And because those evil desires, they can be promoted in so many different ways, and they can be misconstrued by people because the wicked are sly. And I want you to expose them to me. I want you to show me when this wickedness is creeping in, so that the desires of the wicked do not come to pass. And so the promoting of wickedness ends. In Proverbs 25, 21 and 22, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. Now, Paul also quotes this in the book of Romans, but there's more to it. See, if we're going to battle against our enemies the way that God calls us to, your enemy is hungry, give him food. He's thirsty, give him something to drink. In other words, our enemy is in need of something. We are to turn around and demonstrate kindness towards them. And then the part that always makes us feel good as we feel bad in the middle of it all, as verse 22 says, for you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. The most difficult person to stay mad at is the one who will not retaliate with anger. You can't. It doesn't work. Now, it might take a little while, but every time a person that is angry with you for whatever the reason, even if it's rightfully so, and your reaction is kindness, it won't be long, and that anger is going to go away. Or they're going to go away, one or the other. Right? Because people cannot stand being around somebody they're angry at that refuses to retaliate. And this is what God calls us to do. Don't get mad back. Don't retaliate in any way. Let God take care of that part. And this is the whole heaping coals thing. It's not that we are creating the problem. It's not that we are retaliating. It's that God will deal with it. In verse 8 or 9 and 10, as for the head of those who surround me, may the mischief of their lips cover them. May burning coals fall upon them. May they be cast into the fire, into the deep pits from which they cannot rise. Now, it almost seems like this whole section here of this Psalm of David was written in response to what we've looked at in Proverbs. The problem is Solomon wrote Proverbs well after David wrote the Psalms. We know the chronology on this one. Now, not always do we know that, but in this one we do know. So maybe it's a case of Solomon learned this from his father, because there's such a similarity here. Okay? As the head of those who surround me, may the mischief of their lips cover them. In other words, may their own lies expose them. May burning coals fall upon them. Okay? May things happen to them that exposes them as they cast into the fire. Okay? Evil needs to be destroyed. Evil needs to be buried in a deep pit. Basically, David is just saying, evil needs to go. There is no place for evil in my life. It needs to be gone. I'm looking for it in every nook and cranny of my house. And where it's hiding, I'm going to expose it and I'm going to expel it. This is what David is calling us to do. Verse 11, may a slanderer not be established in the earth. May evil hunt the violent man speedily. Getting close to the end here. A slanderer not be established. Well, a slanderer, basically, a gossip. Okay? The two are fairly close related. They're a little bit different, but they're fairly close. So basically he's saying there, may that gossip not be established. Gossip starts. Okay? It's going to happen. We as human beings have a tendency to kind of go down that road. But when it starts, may it get to the next person, and that person has the wisdom to stop it. Or may I be that person that stops it. So it doesn't take root. May evil hunt the violent man speedily. Evil, which we looked at, that leads to violence. May that evil speedily get to that point to where the violence destroys itself. Because one thing that is in common amongst the evil and the righteous, which is really interesting, a hatred of lies. Evil people don't like to be lied to. They like to lie, but they do not like to be lied to. And I find that fascinating, of how there can be this one thing, and there's a few other things out there too, but there's one thing that is a pretty big deal that is universally held, and that lying is bad. Lying is wrong, and I don't like to be lied to. At the same time, many people have no problem in lying, right? So it's a case of, as long as it is me doing the lying, it doesn't really bother me. But if you lie to me, I catch you in a lie, I am going to retaliate. I'm going to hate you. I'm going to start this war. We're going to have problems. But if we would revert that back into our response we're supposed to have, you lie to me, I catch you in the lie, I forgive you for the lie, and I try to mend the relationship. I don't pass on the lie. I don't become part of the gossip problem. I become the solution. I am doing things the way that God tells me to do things. Not to promote the lie, but to squash the lie. But not in anger, but in kindness. Verses 12 and 13. I know that the Lord will maintain the cause of the afflicted and justice for the poor. Sure, the righteous will give thanks to your name. The upright will dwell in your presence. I know the Lord will maintain the cause of the afflicted and justice for the poor. Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Following Jesus Christ is simple and is difficult. It's hard and it's easy. And it's like these are contradictions. You can't have both. But they are so true. See, what we receive is so great. And it's not just what we receive in eternity, it's what we receive in this life. Isn't it nice, or would it be nice, depending on where you're at, to sleep good every night? to not be woken up by worries and concerns, to be able to go through an entire evening, night after night after night, and not be disturbed by thoughts that keep weighing on us. Peace. To have peace. The other thing that would really be nice for us to have and makes our lives so much simpler is if we have contentment. Contentment is also a thing that must be strived for. It's so hard to strive to achieve it, but once we have it, it's so easy to maintain it. Peace is the same way. Harmony. Harmony is another thing that we'd have to strive for, work very hard at, but once we achieve it, it's so easy to maintain it. So in the whole concept of the Christian walk is based upon these things, of doing things, living and acting in a way that is godly. We have the Word of God that gives us all the instructions we need. Everything is laid out for us, how to respond. And generally it's totally contrary to what the world teaches us to respond, how it teaches us to respond. If we're having a problem, retaliate. That's what the world says. And what does it do? It creates a greater problem. Somebody hurts me, I'm going to hurt them back. And the whole concept of, well, the Bible says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. They poked me in the eye, I'm going to poke them in two eyes. Okay? That's not the teaching in that passage. The teaching in that passage is punishment should never be excessive. That's what that passage is teaching. And it can be a lot less. Just because somebody pokes you in the eye doesn't mean you even poke them back in the eye. That's not what it's about. So justice. Sure, the righteous will give thanks in your name, because we should thank our God for who he is and what he has done. And then what do we have? The upright will dwell in your presence. We will dwell in the presence of our Lord. That day is coming for each of us. And that day will be the most wonderful thing that could possibly imagine, or it can be the most terrifying. But we will stand in the presence of our Lord. Okay? There's no escaping that. That is going to happen. And that is so true for every one of us, and that is so true for every person on this planet, and ever has been on this planet. It's going to happen. So our decision is, do I want that to be a wonderful experience, or am I terrified by that experience? All we got to do is trust and obey.